When a group of 13 people went on a school trip to the Knitterdale cave system in North Yorkshire, they didn't expect that an unpredictable flow of water would flood the cave and cost the life of one person. This is the true tragedy of the Manchester Hole in North Yorkshire. On the 14th of November 2005, a group of 100 students, teachers, and volunteers aimed to visit the Knitterdale Cave in North Yorkshire. To enhance their exploration of the cave, they divided into smaller groups, each consisting of 11 children. Each group was supervised by a teacher, and some included a volunteer adult to ensure the children's safety. The Tadcaster Grammar School decided to organize such a trip each year to teach children in a different way. The goal was to develop collaboration and teamwork while also exposing them to the beauty of the surrounding nature. The Manchester Hole, located in North Yorkshire, is known for its striking underground landscapes, including challenging passages and significant water features, making it a popular site for cavers and educational groups of all levels interested in geology. Its proximity to a nearby reservoir adds another layer of interest, enriching the exploration experience with insights into the interaction between underground and surface water systems. One of the students in this group was Joseph Lister, a 14-year-old boy renowned for his exceptional football skills, popularity among his peers, especially the girls, prowess in swimming, and outstanding academic achievements. Often described as successful in everything he undertook, Joseph's excitement for the trip was palpable. According to his parents, Paula and Martin Lister, he was eagerly looking forward to exploring the cave, an adventure that seemed to promise a new realm of discovery for him. The journey began with a group of 13 people, including Joseph, his math teacher, and a 17-year-old volunteer. As the other groups departed, they opted for a less popular route through Manchester Hole, given that the main entrance was partially flooded. Unwilling to risk the well-being of the students, who weren't dressed for such conditions, the decision was made to avoid the flooded path. The only precaution they had taken against the wet conditions was wearing Wellington boots to keep their feet dry. To ensure the group's safety, a thorough check of the weather forecast was conducted beforehand to confirm that no rain was expected and that conditions would be favorable. Despite these precautions, it was noted that the water would be cold at that time of year, a factor that was anticipated and deemed manageable. After a few hours walking at a good pace, the group ended up at a tunnel known as the Crawl. As the group crawled through to reach the lower part of the cave, they noticed that something wasn't right. Their feet were starting to disappear under a flow of water that was coming from nowhere. The water level began to rise rapidly, alerting the adults that the only way out was to quickly navigate back through the crawl tunnel. However, by the time they communicated the urgency of climbing back through the tunnel to the group, the water had already risen above the teenagers' knees, adding a critical layer of challenge to their escape. The group managed to reach the narrow tunnel, but upon arrival, the students were confronted with a daunting sight. It was almost completely submerged in water. There was just a small gap near the ceiling where the water hadn't reached, providing the only available air pocket. Within this confined space, the math teacher made every effort to soothe the horrified teenagers, all of whom were clinging to that slender breath of air for survival. They began, one by one, to navigate the underwater tunnel. Initially, students divided and swam through a narrow section, emerging midway to catch their breath in a small air pocket. However, this temporary respite was only available to the first half of the group. By the time the next 3 students embarked on their dive, the precious pocket of air had been submerged. Left with no alternative, they were forced to swim through the tunnel on a single breath, braving the ice-cold water. From an outside perspective, the task might seem manageable, but the teenagers encountered extremely challenging conditions. These included freezing water temperatures, the disorientation of being in an unfamiliar environment filled with sharp stones, and the enveloping darkness mitigated only by the faint glow of some helmet lights. In such critical moments where every second counts, the group of teenagers began to panic. Almost everyone started crying, expressing a desperate wish to return home to their parents. The math teacher, while deeply empathetic toward the boy's fear, also recognized the urgency of the situation. He was acutely aware that time spent calming fears was time lost against their battle for survival, understanding that these wasted minutes could ultimately determine the difference between life and death. As the water continued to rise with no sign of stopping, it became a race against time before the bottleneck chamber would fill up entirely, threatening the survival of everyone trapped inside. In a desperate bid for safety, the teenagers plunged into the depths, hoping to emerge at the other end of the narrow tunnel. Joseph Lister's group, being the last, followed suit with one of the instructors accompanying them. The instructor could see the panic etched on their faces as the water level rose, leaving barely any airspace. Making a swift decision, he took a deep breath and, understanding the gravity of the moment, grabbed two students, pulling them along in a rush to escape. With no time to spare, he hoped fervently that his headlight would remain on, illuminating their path through the perilous dive. One of Joseph's classmates remembered him saying, "We have to get through it now, or we're not going to get out of here." Amidst the palpable fear that none of the teenagers would emerge alive, they began their dive. A critical moment arose when Amy, one of the students, took a wrong turn in the tunnel. Reacting quickly, the 17-year-old volunteer diverged from the planned path, risking his own life to ensure her safety. After the group emerged and regrouped, the teacher conducted a head count, revealing a harrowing truth. After the head count, only 10 students were present. It quickly became apparent that Joseph hadn't made it out. He remained in the lower cave, having disappeared into the icy waters. The teachers immediately wanted to go back for Joseph, but the others stopped them, realizing that to attempt a rescue would mean certain death, given that the cave was now completely filled with water. With heavy hearts, but clinging to a sliver of hope that Joseph might still be alive in an air pocket, the group, freezing and exhausted, did their best to wade and nearly swim toward the cave's exit to summon help for their friend. As they awaited the rescue team, the teacher learned from the students that just before the dive, Joseph had insisted a classmate go ahead of them, asserting he was a strong swimmer and could assist others if necessary. Tragically, it was Joseph who found himself in need of assistance. His heroic disposition hadn't been enough to conquer the cave's challenges. The first rescuer to arrive at the cave was Christopher Fox. Having visited this cave often in the past, he knew the place very well, almost like the back of his hand. As he entered the main chamber, he immediately sensed the urgency of action and decided to plunge into the frigid water on his own without waiting for the rest of the rescue team. He was aware that every second counted. Ironically, by this point, the water level had significantly dropped, and the cave seemed quite benign, as if nothing had happened. This drop in the water level was a peculiar phenomenon, but at that moment, the priority was to find Joseph alive. As the rescuer descended, he noticed a pair of Wellington boots floating in the water. The water level had significantly decreased, barely covering his ankles with the icy cold water. Fox harbored a hope of finding a young boy near the boots, shaken and freezing, yet alive. However, upon reaching the cave floor, he was confronted with a grim discovery that shattered nearly all the hope he held. Joseph was lying on the rocky floor of the cave, covered with a thin layer of what was almost ice. He wasn't breathing, so the rescuer began to shake him, but there was no response. Christopher swiftly carried him to the exit, where other rescuers and paramedics were already waiting. They rushed Joseph to the hospital, where it was discovered his lungs were filled with water. Despite the doctor's best efforts to revive him, it was too late. His body temperature had dropped too low for his heart to be restarted. With no other options, the doctors pronounced him dead. But what exactly happened to Joseph in the cave? Why did the water rise so rapidly? In the aftermath of the tragedy, an investigation was launched to find answers. It was determined that Joseph's death was an accident. Being a proficient swimmer, he should have been able to cross the tunnel, but his foot became entangled in a sharp rock, leading to his drowning. This explains why his boots were found separately. The remaining question was how the water level could have risen so fast in the cave. Sudden rainfall is a known cause, but there was no rain forecasted. The cave was considered safe, even for beginners and teenagers, and the instructor had checked to ensure that rain wouldn't be a problem that day. The one factor they overlooked was the reservoir near the cave. It had rained a few days before the school trip, filling the reservoir to the brim. On the day of the trip, strong winds whipped up waves that overflowed the hills, streaming down into crevices and eventually reaching the cave system. Each gust of wind pushed dozens of liters of water into the cave, explaining the rapid fill-up. Tragically, it was precisely at this moment that Joseph and his friends were inside Manchester Hole. As the wind died down, the water levels slowly receded back into the earth. In response to the tragedy, Joseph's parents filed a lawsuit against the education center responsible for organizing the trip, arguing that the instructors had failed to adequately assess the weather forecast and the reservoir levels before allowing the children into the cave. Despite video evidence of the wind presented by the prosecution to illustrate the extreme conditions, the court ruled that the North Yorkshire County had taken all necessary precautions to ensure the safety of the teenagers. It was determined that monitoring the reservoir level was not a standard responsibility, and that there had been no previous incidents linked to the reservoir that could have served as a warning. It was concluded that the tragic events at Manchester Hole were unforeseeable. This unforeseen tragedy of Joseph Lister is a somber reminder of nature's unpredictable force. This was the true tragedy of Joseph Lister. May his soul rest in peace.